Welcome to this explainer. So, picture this. You've got a completely deafening stadium, millions of people watching around the globe, and just a single ball sitting exactly 12 yards away from the goal line. It is a fundamental, almost laughably simple action that these professional athletes execute flawlessly in training every single day. But the second that whistle blows for a penalty shootout, the tension becomes absolutely suffocating. The stakes skyrocket, all the air is just sucked right out of the room, and that 12-yard kick turns into the ultimate psychological pressure cooker. Today, we're going completely under the hood. We're going to unpack the exact anatomy of a choke and explore the incredibly fascinating brain science, behavioral economics, and hidden game theory behind the penalty shootout. To really wrap our heads around the science, we first have to understand the massive emotional stakes at play here. Think back to the 1994 World Cup final. The legendary Italian forward Roberto Baggio, the divine ponytail himself, a guy who had practically single-handedly dragged his nation to the final at the Rose Bowl, steps up to the spot against Brazil. He aims down the middle, and the ball flies 3 meters over the crossbar. Brazil wins the championship. Years later, reflecting on that agonizing, life-altering moment, Baggio said, "I felt myself dying inside. It is a wound that never closes. To this day, I still haven't truly accepted that it happened. It haunts me." Okay, let's dive into this. How on earth is it that elite athletes, players who can effortlessly drop a 50-meter pass right onto a teammate's toe while running at a full sprint, fail at something so remarkably simple? What is literally happening inside their brains and bodies when the weight of an entire nation or a massive club is resting squarely on their shoulders? Well, spoiler alert, the answer really isn't about their feet at all. It's entirely about how their minds process extreme, isolated pressure. Section 1. The ultimate football heartbreak. You see, penalty shootouts are where lifelong heroes are forged, absolutely. But they're also the exact arenas where the sport's most devastating, tragic narratives are written in stone. Take a really recent, agonizing example. After putting together a historic season pushing for a massive double, Arsenal found themselves locked in the Champions League final against PSG. The grueling match went the distance, right down to the wire in a shootout, and it was Arsenal defender Gabriel whose missed spot kick ultimately handed the prestigious trophy right to the Parisian side. It's just a brutal reminder of the razor-thin margins of this game. You are literally one successful kick away from immortality, or one miss away from living with the echo forever. And honestly, if we look at the historical data, nobody is safe. No nation, no club, no superstar is immune to the curse of the shootout. Just look at England's well-documented, super painful record of 7 shootout losses across the World Cups and Euros. Or take Brahim Diaz, the tournament's top scorer, whose missed Panenka penalty in the Africa Cup of Nations handed the trophy to Senegal. Or how about the legendary 2005 Champions League final? A completely stacked AC Milan squad famously blew a 3-0 halftime lead, only to lose to Liverpool in penalties. Heartbreak is really the one true constant here. And the data proves this pressure is tangibly, measurably real. Let's put this into perspective. During normal open play, professional players convert penalty kicks at a highly reliable rate of 85%. But when you isolate that exact same kick in the context of a high-stakes Champions League penalty shootout, that conversion rate completely plummets to just 69%. Think about that. The physical task hasn't changed by a single millimeter, but the mathematical success rate drops through the floor. So what exactly is changing? Section 2. The neuroscience of choking. This is where it gets super cool. Thanks to massive advancements in sports science, researchers have actually equipped professional players with FNIRS brain-scanning headsets during real penalty kicks to see exactly what goes wrong when a player chokes, and the scans literally map out the physiological problem. When a player successfully handles the pressure, their brain scans light up right in the motor cortex. That's the area of the brain responsible for flowing physical movement. Their brain is purely focused on the mechanics of the kick. But for players who choke, the scans show massive activation in the prefrontal cortex. This area is all about long-term thinking and anxiety. So they aren't thinking about the ball at all. They're actively overthinking the catastrophic consequences of missing, which literally, physically disrupts their motor skills. It's wild. This ties perfectly into behavioral economics and Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's concept of loss aversion. It's the psychological truth that the pain of losing is felt far, far more intensely than the joy of winning. Check this out. In shootouts, if a player is taking a penalty that will instantly win them the match, they score an incredible 92% of the time. But if they step up to take a penalty where a miss means their team is instantly eliminated, their success rate drops below 60%. The sheer fear of failure literally paralyzes them. Section 3. Inside the kicker's mind. So, knowing what the brain is doing, how do the best players optimize their behavior before their foot even touches the ball? Well, the outcome is almost always decided during that solitary, highly stressful walk to the penalty spot. Time and pacing play a massive role here. Emphasize this tiny fraction of time for a second, 200 milliseconds. Data reveals that players who rush their kick, responding less than 200 milliseconds after the referee blows the whistle, only have a 57% success rate. The desperate psychological desire to just get this agonizing moment over with completely overrides their technique, leading to poor execution and a highly probable miss. Now, what's really interesting about this is how simple the behavioral fix actually is. Players who literally force themselves to pause for at least 1 full second after the whistle before starting their run-up see their conversion rate rocket to over 80%. Just taking one single deliberate breath allows the brain to transition away from panic and effectively prepare the motor cortex for the complex physical action ahead. Patience pays off immensely. These physical pauses build into an overarching mental strategy. Empirical data shows that optimal kicker tactics include using a keeper-independent approach. Basically, this means picking your spot early and absolutely committing to it, because changing your mind mid-run-up almost always leads to failure. Secondly, avoiding eye contact with the keeper significantly reduces anxiety and stops the goalie from reading the shooter's nerves. And lastly, elite kickers use functional imagery training to heavily visualize the pressure beforehand so that the real moment just feels like another practice run.
Section 4. The goalkeeper's dilemma.
But of course, there's a second actor in this psychological drama, facing their own massive, counterintuitive realities between the sticks: the goalkeeper. Data analyzing hundreds of elite penalties reveals math that is genuinely shocking. Statistically, goalkeepers save 33% of penalties if they simply stand completely still in the center of the goal. In comparison, they only save about 14% when diving left and 13% diving right, meaning mathematically, a keeper is more than twice as likely to make a save if they just hold their ground and do absolutely nothing. Yet, despite those stats, goalkeepers choose to dive a staggering 93.7% of the time. Why on earth would they do that? Well, it comes down to action bias. Humans suffer far more psychological regret when a bad thing happens because they did nothing compared to when they actively tried to prevent it. Think about it. If a keeper stands perfectly still and the ball goes in, they look foolish. But if they dive and miss, well, at least it looks like they made a heroic effort. They would rather fail looking like they tried than fail standing still. And keepers have their own subtle psychological weapons, right down to their wardrobe. This is such a fascinating piece of trivia. Conversion rates actually change based on the goalkeeper's kit color. Kickers score 75% of the time against a keeper in green and 72% against a keeper in blue. But when the goalkeeper is wearing red, the conversion rate plummets to an incredible 54%. Psychologically, the color red projects dominance, confidence, and experience, which subconsciously intimidates the penalty taker. It's absolutely wild that something like a shirt color can swing the odds.
Section 5. The math of the shootout.
Beyond the individual psychology of the kicker and the keeper, there's this overarching game theory that governs the entire event. Take the initial coin toss, for example. We usually think of a coin toss as a perfectly fair 50-50 scenario, right? But the data says otherwise. The team that wins the toss and chooses to shoot first actually wins the shootout 60.5% of the time. The team shooting second is burdened with a massive compounding psychological pressure. Because they're constantly playing catch-up on the scoreboard throughout the ordeal, their anxiety literally multiplies with every single round. And to combat the goalies who heavily study their past kicks, elite takers apply strict game theory. It turns out true randomness completely beats repetition. Professional kickers statistically randomize their placement, distributing their shots across the left, right, and center at rates that perfectly align with mathematical Nash equilibrium models. This means neither player can gain an edge by simply changing their strategy. They do this specifically to ensure that opposing keepers cannot pick up on any recognizable, predictable patterns. They literally have to become perfectly mathematically random.
Section 6. Life after the miss.
Finally, let's step away from the hard numbers and the FNRARS brain scans for a minute, because behind every single data point of a missed penalty is a real human being who has to wake up the next morning and keep playing. So the crucial point is, how do these athletes process the aftermath? Let's return to Gabriel, following his heartbreaking miss in the Champions League final. When asked about it later while away on international duty, he found profound perspective. He acknowledged the brutal reality, saying, when you have to score a penalty, there are consequences. But he immediately zoomed out to his team's overarching success, adding, but I cannot complain. I had a very good season. Elite athletes simply refuse to let one singular 12-yard kick define their entire existence. And within that same devastating moment, we saw a truly brilliant display of humanity. When Gabriel's penalty failed to find the net, the opposing PSG squad naturally erupted. But Gabriel's Brazilian national teammate, PSG defender Marquinhos, did something different. He actively chose not to celebrate. Instead, he crossed the pitch directly to embrace his completely shattered rival. It just goes to show that amidst all the heartbreaking math, the loss aversion, and the intense brain science, deep sportsmanship and human empathy still prevail. We've seen how the brain's prefrontal cortex can betray a player, why standing perfectly still is literally the bravest thing a goalkeeper can do, and how a simple coin toss skews the odds. Which leaves us with this final thought. Knowing how profoundly cruel the math and the psychology of this event really are, is the agonizing psychological gamble of the penalty shootout exactly what makes the beautiful game so undeniably compelling? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.